another very fun surface to draw. We have every term squared and there's a plus sign and equals to one of the variable. So in this case, I have it equal to the z variable, which means the cone will be along the z-axis. So again, we'll write down the center for the surface. So our center is going to be xo, yo, and zo. Now let's take a look at what are the traces. So for instance, if I let x equals x naught, so x is gone from our picture, so you'll have y and z. If you were to square root both sides, you will have equation of lines with positive and negative slopes. So in the YZ plane, our traces are going to be lines. So the traces are lines. Similarly, if you ignore y and look at x and z, do the same thing, take square root on both sides to solve for x or z. You'll have plus and minus some constant times x or z, which means that in xz plane, the traces are also lines. Now, if you ignore z or let z be a constant, so if z is a constant, really any constant, then you'll have circles because you'll have this on both of these terms squared equals to a number, which will give you a circle of radius of some constant. So these traces are going to be circles or really ellipses as well. So that's how we're going to create the cone. Now this would be in the in XY plane. So that's how the traces are look like. Let's take a look at this wonderful picture. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my axis and show you how it looks like. So here's my X, Y, and Z plane. I'm going to go ahead and label them. This is X, this is Y, this is Z, and down here is our negative Z axis. You can label negative X and Y, but that's not so important. Now, for simplicity, we're going to assume X naught, Y naught, Z naught are zeros. So let's suppose they are right here. Now, when I look at the traces in the XZ plane or XZ and YZ plane, they're lines. So they're going to be line of positive and negative slopes. You're going to have two lines. So for instance, maybe depending on the slope, maybe one of them looks like that, and another one would look like this, passing through the center. And the traces in the XY plane, they're circles or ellipses, depending on A and B values. So we'll have something like this. So, and these circles gets larger and larger as you increase the value of Z. So something like this. And then we also have these circles down here, or ellipses. I'm going to try to recreate this side. Hopefully you'll have an idea of how this is. So this is pretty straightforward, nothing too crazy going on. And draw your traces carefully. So there you go. So this is our center, which is XO, YO, ZO. Let's draw this surface. So we have x squared plus y squared equals z squared. So we know the center, it's going to be 0, 0, 0. Now, since everything is squared, it's equal to z squared, and z is the variable on the other side, so it's going to be a cone along the z-axis. Now, if you were to solve for the equation of those lines, for example, in YZ plane, I'm just having x to 0, so you'll have y squared is equal to z squared. And now we take the square root on both sides. We have y is equal to plus and minus z. So that's the equation of the line. Now you can put the plus and minus on the left side or the right side. It doesn't really matter. So these are just lines with positive and negative slopes. And similarly, you can do the same thing in the xz plane. So in xz plane, y is 0, so you'll have x squared is equal to z squared. So take the square root, you'll have x is equal to plus and minus z, or z is equal to plus and minus x. Again, lines of positive and negative slope 1. And in the xy plane, we're going to have circles of different radius. So hopefully you can see that. Let's come up with a sketch. Here's our X, Y, and Z plane. This is X, this is Y, this is Z. Here is the Z-axis. And we're going to draw the line of slope 1. So I'm just going to do a rough sketch. My center is right here. And let's suppose this is one of the line. And let's suppose this is another line. So there you go. And then here are the traces. So this is one of the circle. In this case, these traces are circles. So it looks like an ellipse, but actually if you zoom this in 3D calculator, you'll see circles of different radius. And then here we also have circles of bigger radius. So something like that. And the cone extend in both direction, this direction and this direction. Now this is an infinite two-sided cone. Now if you only want to look at the cone where Z is positive, then we would be looking at this cone right here. So starting from 0 equals 0, so we're looking at Z greater than or equal to 0. That will be the cone on the positive Z-axis. Now, if you want to look at the cone on the negative Z-axis, then we're only looking at this piece right here. So that would be the cone where Z is less than or equal to 0. So you can break it up into different sections and study them. So here's another example. Now let's put this in standard form by dividing everything by 4. So you'll have x squared plus y squared is equals to z squared over 4. Now we could identify the center now. So the center is, again, the origin, 0, 0, 0. So now this 4, it just tells you the slope of those lines that we're going to get in the xz plane or the yz plane. So don't get thrown off by that coefficients. So here's my plane. And we know the center is 0, 0, 0. Let's suppose this is our negative z-axis. Now we know this is a cone because we have everything squared and it's equal to a variable that's also being squared. So plot the center first, always. Here's the 0, 0, 0. And then now if you want to find the equation of the traces, you can do that, set one of the variable to 0. For instance, I can set x equals 0. So x disappears. You have y squared is equal to z squared over 4. Take the square root. So you have y is equal to plus and minus 1/2 z. So you can write it like that, or you can just multiply both sides by 2 plus and minus. You'll have z is equal to plus and minus 2y. So your slope, you can look at it this way. Z is equal to plus and minus 2. So that's your slope, and y is the variable. Or you can look at it this way. Doesn't matter, as long as we know these are lines of positive and negative slope, we just roughly sketch them. You'll have something similar along the xz plane as well. So here's my line with positive and negative slopes. So here's one of them. And here's the other one. And then we draw our traces. So in the xy plane, they're going to be circles of different radius. So let's start with the one from the bottom. And pretty much just trace as many as you want. And know that this is an infinite two-sided cone. So I'll draw one up here as well. All right, so there you go.